Alright, so I'm finally going to be talking about the strange creatures within this game universe, the Mr. Saturns. Skip the BS intro and let's get right to it. The Mr. Saturns. What is to be said about them besides the obvious that they're just kind of like an uglier version of, say, Kirby? Are like this weird kind of amorphous shape almost, with two little stubby legs, very tiny body, big nose that takes up most of its structure, some whisker-looking things, single hair with a bow on it, and that's it. A pretty much featureless kind of weird character or species, I guess you could say, within this Earthbound or Mother universe. But even with their simple design and strange kind of way of speaking and behavior and such, they are extremely important to the entire, I guess you could say, plot of these games, or at least in this game, Earthbound, and the next game, Mother 3, at some point at least. They are these surprisingly, I guess you could say, eccentric creatures. Like they are able to do things or think some ways that the humans in that universe are not able to. And the main kind of thing I wanted to analyze or whatever about the Mr. Saturns is just their names themselves and what kind of comes out of that. When you think of Saturn, you immediately think of most likely the quote-unquote the planet, the whatever orbital body that we're told about is somewhere in our Milky Way galaxy kind of shit. So you think of Saturn like that. So you think like, oh, maybe they're from Saturn or something like that. But then it also makes you think, okay, so Saturn is obviously something that came from one of these religions or these gods, these cultures, whatever. That's what the planet was named after, supposedly, is one of these, or that's what the planet is from their interpretation, whatever, is this thing, this person being Saturn. After doing a little bit of like surface level research, I'm still not 100% clear why it kind of works like this, but apparently Chronos, the god of time, is often translated or often associated with the, I guess, Roman god or Greek god or something like that, whatever pantheon of Saturn. So Chronos and Saturn are the same thing, basically. At least that's what I'm kind of gleaning from this. I could be completely wrong, but at least in the context that I'm going by, Chronos and Saturn, they're synonymous in this interpretation. Chronos is Saturn, Saturn is Chronos. Chronos is the god of time or is the physical representation of time. So Saturn itself is kind of that same thing. It is the god of time, whatever. And supposedly Chronos and I think Saturn both are seen as carrying sickles or like a scythe, which would be, at least when I immediately think of something like the Grim Reaper, that character entity, whatever, I would think of the sickle or the scythe as one of the main things. So apparently Saturn and Chronos are also like the gods of death. I guess it makes sense if you're going to be going by it to the god of time. At least from what we're told, time going to happen with time is that something is going to die eventually. Like that's just the inevitable. Like if you don't get hit by a car, you're going to eventually die you're going to get to your death through the passing of time. So if Chronos and Saturn are to be seen as the god of both time and death, then that's kind of what I'm going by here. On that subject, what do the Mr. Saturns in this game have to do with any of that? The way that I'm interpreting it is basically more so, maybe not so much the death, but maybe somebody can glean something out of that, maybe. But more so the time part. The Mr. Saturn, they dwell in a place, or they live in a place in the game called Saturn Valley. Their names are Mr. Saturns, and they are very strange that they speak in a very weird way. They seem to speak English, like they speak English, or in Japanese, they speak Japanese, but so you can understand them, but they speak in a very weird way and dialecting and kind of just like very simple and childish and kind of nonsensical in some ways. Backstory, interestingly, is that the font that the Mr. Saturn use from Japan is actually from, I guess, Shigesato Itoi's daughter, I believe, is actually like her handwriting, and then they transcribe that into the font that they use for the Mr. Mr. Saturns. I don't know how they got it for the English. It might be the same deal, but it looks very strange, very alien kind of way of talking, I guess you could say, but you could still kind of get the words out of it, even if it doesn't make too much sense. So you have these alien creatures that have this weird way of talking that have, for some reason, have this symbolism of Saturn involved with them. And all their devices are very strange, too. I don't know what the deal is. I have a hard time interpreting it, but it's like very animated, semi-organic, kind of just weird like things like piggy jelly and just weird stuff like that. They have these weird quirks about them. Besides all that, the main things that I'm going to kind of say is that my interpretation, or my kind of what I've gleaned about the Mr. Saturns being related to this, the whole, in their name, the symbolism of Saturn, is that for some reason, of all the other creatures, the Mr. Saturn, at least this is what Dr.Andonuts says, these Mr. Saturn are one of the main reasons that the phase distorter machine, or the phase distorter device, is able to be created. That which is able to travel through different points in time, basically instantaneously. It's definitely not a coincidence, I would say, that Saturn, being the god of time and death, but mostly time, is that these creatures called the Mr. Saturns, for some reason, are very well versed, or whatever, somehow able to understand the concept of time itself, or how to travel through time, or what time is, enough that they were able to help probably immensely, if not most of it, in making this machine that is able to travel through time. And interesting, maybe on the death thing, is that the Phase Distorter 3 does not allow life to travel through it. Maybe that's related to the death or something, is that they had to go in their robot bodies. I don't know. Yeah, like, I wish I kind of had a better, maybe more crazy and interesting things to kind of say, but as far as I was able to interpret, the Mr. Saturn have that name. They are related to it in that they somehow are able to understand, as whatever species they are, whatever creature they are, they're able to understand, possibly see through the veil that is the concept of time, able to easily manipulate it and go through it like nothing, pretty much, with the help to inventing that phase distorter they were able to. And I also just wanted to note that when I actually made this note about the Mr. Saturns, I think I was thinking about it in the shower or something. During all this, I noticed that some channels, especially like Matt's, seem to have been mentioning stuff. I guess maybe some people like Levent or whatever were mentioning stuff a lot about, was the Saturn-Moon matrix and Saturn-Moon conjunction, or whatever kind of astrological events that were happening, or something supposedly happening, whatever. And apparently the star Sirius being based around Saturn or something. You know, very weird, but I guess you could say important if you're into astrology kind of stuff, and potentially some interpretations of the way that you think some events happen here, or some energy happens, some specific dates and times and events that happen, so certain wavelengths and frequencies are different to amplify certain things or whatever, be taken advantage of. But yeah, that was kind of outside the point, but just interesting nevertheless. Pretty much I think all I had to say about the Mr. Saturn, even though I'm sure there is probably someone that can interpret way more than I can, because I did such surface level research involving Saturn and the Greek pantheon and whatever. You know, I don't know all the stuff, but that's what I kind of gleaned from it, even with my surface level research, whatever you want to call it. So that's what I had, is that these Mr. Saturn, with their name, with the place they live in, and with their seemingly special abilities and knowledge, the Saturn and Chronos being the time god and the death god in some cases, these Mr. Saturn are able to understand, visualize, interpret, and manipulate the time much more than these other creatures, these other species, whatever, in that universe. So, what does that have to say? I don't 100% know. But the next video, I'm probably going to be doing a bunch of just like smaller miscellaneous sort of things that I wanted to cover that probably don't need to be talked about in a full video. So I think that's going to be kind of just a bunch of things that I want to get through pretty quickly, I guess. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.